This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to the American Monetary Association's podcast, where we explore how monetary policy impacts the real lives of real people and the action steps necessary to preserve wealth and enhance one's lifestyle.
It's my pleasure to welcome David Sussman to the show. He is the founder and CEO of Valcor Worldwide and has some fantastic insights into what is going on with small to medium-sized businesses, commercial real estate, and the impact of COVID-19 on a much deeper level than you hear about from the talking heads in the media. So, David, welcome. It's good to have you.
Thanks, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate it.
Where are you located?
We have offices in Vancouver and in Southern California.
Okay, good stuff. And where are you, actually?
Right now, I'm in California.
Okay, good. Vancouver, talk about a bubble. Wow. That was, what's interesting about this whole thing is that before the crisis hit, there was really a crisis looming anyway. I mean, we were overdue for a recession. A lot of people getting very political right now. And, that's sort of interesting. The arguments, I think in a way, really, this is given the Trump administration good cover and explanation for the recession that was probably going to happen anyway. I don't know. That's my theory. What do you think?
Yeah. When we combine politics and the economy, you can't help to do that because obviously policy comes out of whatever administration is in at the time. I had a long discussion, and it's actually an episode that we're going to be putting up on Valcor Worldwide with Stephen Moore, who is the economic advisor to this White House. He's a recovery expert as well for this White House, and they are suitably concerned about what we're seeing right now. The fact is that mainstream media can really only focus on one or two balls at the same time. Right now, they're focused on COVID-19, as they should be, and election 2020. So a lot of the news is not being reported as specifically regarding what is happening in the economy. And I believe that there is a tsunami that's heading our way, and it's going to hurt a lot of people.
So tell us about the tsunami, because this has been a very uneven recession. We see people that are doing great, the people in the knowledge workforce that can work remotely, they're doing fine. In fact, a lot of them are doing better. But then we see a whole other segment of the economy, sadly, that is very hard hit by this. But it's really the knock-on effects. We were talking before we started about commercial real estate, and obviously so many segments of commercial real estate are suffering greatly. But then you have the defaults coming and the mortgage-backed securities, and the economy is definitely very interconnected. But what are your thoughts about the tsunami you mentioned?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, in 2008, we had a liquidity crisis, right? I mean, you talk about mortgage-backed securities. That was what precipitated the collapse starting in 2007. You had the subprimes, and we know the stories. And banks, for the last 12 years have been looking in their rearview mirror to try to prevent that from happening again. So they weren't doing the crazy 125% loans and being a lot more selective with who they were lending money to. But with the dramatic appreciation in real estate, individual real estate to residential, as well as commercial real estate in the past few years, a lot of people have been projecting that we are seeing a bubble occurring. And we just, the thing is, Jason, and you know this better than most, the economy is a living, breathing entity. Think of lungs that we use to breathe. You have to expand and contract. And you have to have a recession every 7 to 10 years to basically just kind of shake the economy off, get rid of some of the excess, and keep things normal. Well, technically, we haven't had a recession since 2007, 2008. It's 12 years. We were in a recession this year because of COVID, not because of economic policy. But what the banks have now done is, because of this and because of the concern that they're seeing, because of the massive numbers of commercial real estate defaults that we're seeing. And it isn't just offices downtown big cities. It's strip malls in the suburbs and office parks. We're seeing in retail and hospitality, restaurants. The Independent Restaurant Association of America just a couple of months ago predicted that they're going to be seeing 80% of independent restaurants close their doors because of COVID. And that was only 3 to 4 months into this. Now we're heading into 6 months.
Oh, yeah.
So what's going to happen? What's as you correctly stated, the domino effect of all of those offices that don't need 50% of their employees to come to the city every day? Sushi bars and restaurants and clubs and dry cleaners and all of those supporting cast of characters in those neighborhoods are also not going to have traffic. So how far down does this go before you have a complete what Sam Zell says, the institutional investor, a Detroitification of downtowns across the country?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sam Zell owns a lot of office properties in his equity office fund. What are the just drill down on it any more you can. These are certainly issues we've been talking about for months. I agree with you completely. Office and retail are the hard hit. Warehouse doing okay, I think.
Yes, well, warehouses are actually increasing, and industrial's increasing as well.
Delivery, yeah, absolutely. And industrial with jobs coming back on shore, I think certainly in spite of trade war issues, certainly this is going to lead to more onshoring of jobs. It's really kind of the Trump agenda that's going to play out just by nature of what's happened and the fact that the trust with China has been breached so significantly. It's interesting too. I've heard a lot and read a lot about this sort of hub and spoke model that the airlines always talk about, and how large companies are planning to do that with office and open small suburban office meeting places and get rid of their big trophy offices or really cut the size of them dramatically in the cities. The interesting thing nobody talks about is this is making business a lot more efficient. This whole crisis, everybody has finally adopted real telecom, Zoom, et cetera, that's just forced the adoption of that. And so in a lot of ways, business is really becoming a lot more streamlined and a lot more efficient. People that used to expect to meet you don't expect that or even want it anymore. And that's kind of convenient, frankly. You can just get a lot more done. There are some definite good things coming out of it, right?
Yeah, they say that the trajectory that was supposed to have taken a decade for us to do what we're doing right now,
it was compressed
into a few months, right? And people adapt or they die. And what we're using right now as far as technology is probably going to be obsolete in a year right now. They're saying right now there's probably 6 or 7 Zoom killers. Yeah. Right. So this is going to be even more efficient. Sure. It's going to be, I don't know how, but the technology is only going to improve. And they say that in times of strife and stress, then you get $1 million corporations that are being formed in people's garages right now. So I'm an eternal optimist, half glass full person, but we've got some serious storms to navigate over the next couple of years to get through to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, tell us about those storms.
It comes back to this, and it comes back to really at the very beginning, what you're talking about. There's been a decoupling of the economy right now. What we're seeing happening on Wall Street doesn't represent what is happening on Main Street. And small business, the SMBs, which is our bread and butter, this is who we help, right? Small businesses. There's 32 million small businesses in the country. 32 million. 67% of employees that are employed in the country rely upon small businesses. So small businesses are the lifeblood. And while you are absolutely correct that some of the large corporations are doing better, the Amazons, the Walmarts of the world right now, we're all ordering online. Right? Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to go to the stores if they don't have to. And that's great if they have distribution centers and logistical supply chains are going to benefit from that. But what happens to the retailers? What happens to the restaurants? What happens to commercial real estate developers and owners that have mortgages to pay? I just saw that there was a federal moratorium on foreclosures and kicking people out. Okay. What if you own that property and you've got a mortgage to pay? How far up that chain do we go? So the banks are going to end up with a significant number of defaults. They're going to have to either extend and pretend. They're going to have to lower interest rates or reduce the principal. We're seeing commercial real estate and residential real estate in the cities right now dropping 10, 20, 30. In New York, they're talking 50% and maybe even more. What if you bought property in the last couple of years and you're at 80, 90% and you're now at 50% as far as the equity in there? You're upside down.
No question. And speaking of acceleration, when we talked about the acceleration of technology, really this creative destruction that's happening much faster than it would have happened anyway. It just would have taken another decade, like you said. But it's also happening to the business unfriendly states and cities. People were already leaving New York. People were already fleeing California. I just saw an article today in Yahoo News. It said New York and California, the land of the flea. FLEE, because people are fleeing, and then they said Texas, the land of the free. So, that trend's been occurring already, and I just think of these municipalities, and their loss of tax revenue is going to be staggering. Yeah, I mean, the kind of municipal default problems coming up, and remember, a lot of individual investors who thought they were being very conservative, they own those bonds. Yeah. And those bonds are going to default. There was already a pension crisis with these public pensions and private pensions too, of course. And now, I mean, that's been
Jason, California and New York don't want to talk about the pension crisis. They've got the fuzzy math. They're in surpluses. Right. Well, they were.
Right. Yeah. Keep on dreaming.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So you're right. I mean, the problem is huge, but is it all just going to be papered over by federal bailouts and money printing?
Well, this is one of the questions that I had for Stephen Moore. And whatever your politics are, whoever, your viewers are and what their politics are, you can't separate politics from the economy.
Of course you can.
Again, whoever is making the rules, those are the policies that people have to play by.
Absolutely.
So again, Stephen Moore, he works for the Trump administration. He's an economic analyst and an advisor, and he's obviously right of thinker and the like. We talked about this. We talked about the fact that you've got these, let's call them blue cities and blue states. These are the ones that are in the most trouble right now. These are the ones that had some of the biggest fallout situations because of COVID, and they are still relatively locked down. Look, you take a look at the numbers of COVID tests that are coming back positive in the states of New York and California. They've dropped off the precipice, okay? The numbers have come down, yet the economy is still locked down. I mean, I guess you can go into a hairstylist if you're the Speaker of the House.
If you're Nancy Pelosi, you can.
You're allowed. But like my ex, and I'm very good friends with her, mother of my kids, she has a small retail store. They're done. I mean, I'm sorry. And it's heartbreaking. Yeah. It's truly heartbreaking when this hits home. You've got business owners that invested their lifeblood into starting a small retail store, clothing stores, restaurants, whatever it is. They are dying, especially in these bluer states. And so that tax revenue, as you correctly stated, doesn't go to the local municipal state coffers. What happens? Now, here's the problem. We are barreling towards $27 trillion in national debt, and that does not include the Federal Reserve balance sheets. And this is before we add another 2 or 3 trillion in stimulus. When Trump came in, we were at 20 trillion. That had doubled in 8 years, which took 250 years to build up to 10 trillion. You talk about papering over it. Yep. What's going to happen to the value of our dollar? Deflation, inflation. There's a reason gold is going through the roof right now.
Sure. Yeah.
So this is all very concerning.
Yeah, it's got to be inflationary ultimately, but technology covers up inflation pretty well, and so does consolidation, sadly. When you talk about the restaurants and the retailers going out of business, it's just more and more consolidation. It all goes to Amazon and a few big players, and that's why we really need some real antitrust enforcement, because you just can't have a society this way where you've got one person worth $200 billion, half the country struggling. That's just not the kind of world I want to live in, honestly. And I'm not a socialist. I'm a libertarian. Okay. But, it's just, we really have a corporate socialism where the big guys have just, they've just taken over the whole game. It's the fangs. They own the world,
yes.
And it's just not balanced, because they have the rent seeking and the laws that are all in their favor. And, they've got the lobbyists. So that's the way it goes.
And they own the information, and they own the distribution of information as well, right, which is even more concerning to me.
In a political time, or in any time, in a time of a pandemic, nobody knows and nobody can evaluate what they never see or hear.
Yeah.
And, we just don't, you can't hear the dogs that don't bark. We don't know what media, what stories we're not seeing. And that's a very dangerous thing, if you ask me. So we'll see how it all turns out. What kind of businesses do you work with, to help them restructure their debts and so forth? Do you have any particular verticals, or is it just generally a size range, the SMB, small to medium market?
Yeah, it's mostly relegated to SMB, small to medium sized businesses. We typically top out about 100 million gross revenues. Most, I would say, our sweet spot is probably between 2 and 3 million to 20. They are the small businesses. Again, the bread and butters, franchises, restaurants, people that own multiple different properties, investors and manufacturing. It crosses multiple different categories of business. The categories of lending that we're able to provide and access for our clients as well also cover multiple categories as well. So it's typically a business that is in trouble, that is a legitimate business, not a fly-by-night organizations. Right. We're not there to help them. Sure. But a business that has been operating, they are in trouble due to circumstances beyond their control right now, COVID. But listen, even in good times, businesses get in trouble. They expand too quickly. Yeah. They don't adapt to new technologies, whatever the reason may be. Internal politics. We're very much like, if you're familiar with The Prophet, Marcus Lemonis.
Sure.
Right? We go into these businesses and help turn them around. And that's what our licensees do. And we're training folks right now who also want to do this around the country to help businesses locally too.
David, what kind of financing is available to small businesses nowadays? Because this is such a key cornerstone of America and its economy. And, coming out of the Great Recession 10, 12 years ago, the banks were just so tight. You just can't get much in the way of financing for a small business. Yet, Goldman Sachs gets all the money, and they get a bailout and they pay themselves $630,000 average bonuses. It's just pathetic the way the whole thing works. It really is. But, can small businesses get any financing? I mean, maybe not in this environment, but what about even, last year, for example?
Yeah, it's a very good question, a question that I get literally every day, because we've got a lot of different clients that come across that we have to qualify ourselves to determine if we can help them. Right now, I'm not going to lie, it is very, very tough. The old adage, if you don't need the money, they'll give it to you.
Yeah.
And so a lot of business owners right now are facing situations where we've got a few deals right now that are in the hopper that we're expecting to close, but the banks do need to see assets. When we're talking about categorized lending for small business loans, they do need to attach some form of assets. Now, the good news is that in most places around the country right now, the commercial real estate default hasn't really hit the apex yet, and that hasn't flowed down to residential. In fact, in some cities around the country, while New York or San Francisco, you're seeing rents drop, the suburbs, the prices are going through the roof because everybody's moving out.
I know.
So a lot of people will have equity and they can attach to that as well. But we don't just do, situations where it's commercial real estate loans. In some cases, we have to take a look at hard money as an option for short term. I don't believe in that. We don't touch anything to do with, those cash loans that they're doing. Merchant cash advances, things like that. Folks stay away from those. They sink their hooks into you and they will kill your business. But we are doing...
You mean that's factoring, right?
No. A factoring is for accounts receivable financing.
Okay.
So merchant cash advances are essentially, you don't even really need any assets. You just have to show that you have, let's say you've got $100,000 in your tax return for the last year. They'll lend a certain amount of that, but they will immediately have you sign a summary judgment if you miss payment by a minute, and they own your business.
Wow. Okay.
It's led to suicides.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
this is a really bad. So you hear these commercials.
Yeah.
Factoring, accounts receivable financing is always good. You can get 80% of what is owed to you over the next 3 months. We're doing private equity funds and other types of money as well. Loan to values have decreased. So where we may have gotten 75 to 80% LTV, we're now down between 50 and 60%. So the banks are definitely more restrictive. They want to know what you had for breakfast in 2007, September the 10th, and they will do their due diligence. And if you have a blemish, they will almost never give you the money right now. So it is definitely tougher.
It's something else. Give out your website.
ValcorWorldwide.com.
Closing thought.
Hang in there. We are looking at a Force 5 hurricane that is going to be coming most likely after the election. Batten down the hatches. We will get through this. America is a strong country, and we will rebound, but you got to hold on to your hat.
You mentioned election. I just got to ask you, any predictions?
Well, this has been reported elsewhere this week, but I've been saying it for a while. I think Donald Trump wins on November the 3rd, and on December the 3rd, Biden wins with mail-in votes. And it's going to be a really long battle.
Oh, yeah, a long court battle after that. Yeah, well, very interesting. David Sussman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Jason. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.